My name is Claire. I was 28 years old when my family decided, in front of a room full of people, that I no longer belonged. The party was supposed to be harmless. One of those family gatherings where everyone pretends things are fine for a few hours because there are witnesses. Food on the table, music playing too loud, conversations that stay shallow on purpose. I almost didn't go. Something in me knew it wasn't safe anymore, but I told myself I was being dramatic, that I should show up, smile, keep my head down, and leave early. That plan lasted about 20 minutes. It started with comments, small ones, side remarks dressed up as jokes, the kind that make everyone laugh except the person they're aimed at. Then it turned into questions. Why I was still struggling, why I hadn't figured things out yet, why I always made things uncomfortable. I tried to brush it off. I stood near the kitchen, holding a drink I wasn't drinking, telling myself I could get through this like I always did, until someone finally said it out loud. "If you're going to act like this," my aunt snapped, loud enough for half the room to hear, "maybe you should just leave." The room went quiet. I looked around, waiting for someone, anyone, to say that wasn't okay. No one did. My mother didn't look at me. My cousins stared at their phones. My uncle just shrugged, like it wasn't his problem. "Don't make a scene," my mom said quietly. "Just go." I felt my face burn. "Where?" I asked. She hesitated, then said the words that still echo in my head. "That's not our problem tonight." I grabbed my bag with shaking hands and walked out. No one followed. The door closed behind me, and suddenly I was standing on the sidewalk with nowhere to go, no money, and the realization that I had just been erased. I didn't know it yet, but someone else had been watching the entire thing. And within days, that would change everything. I stood there for a long moment after the door closed, not because I expected it to open again, but because my body hadn't caught up with what had just happened. Music still leaked faintly from inside the house. Laughter, muffled now, carried through the walls like nothing had changed. Inside, the party was still going. Outside, I had nowhere to go. I checked my phone with shaking hands. 10% battery. 3 missed notifications from a group chat I wasn't sure I belonged in anymore. I opened my contacts and scrolled, stopping and starting, weighing each name like a risk. Who would answer? Who would ask questions I couldn't explain? Who would tell me it was complicated and suggest I call someone else? I didn't call anyone. Pride kept my finger from pressing dial. So did shame. I didn't want to say the words out loud yet, that my own family had thrown me out and told me it wasn't their problem where I slept. I started walking. The night air was cold enough to keep me alert, but not enough to numb anything. I walked past houses with warm lights glowing through windows, past people laughing on porches, past lives that didn't feel reachable anymore. Every few blocks, I stopped and checked my phone again. No new messages, no missed calls. I sat on a bench near a closed cafe and pulled my jacket tighter around me. That was when the weight of it finally hit. Not just the fear, but the humiliation. I wasn't just homeless for the night. I was disposable. That thought hurt more than the cold. I replayed the moment over and over in my head, trying to pinpoint where things had tipped, what I could have said differently, whether staying quieter would have helped, whether leaving earlier would have spared me this. But deep down, I knew the truth. This wasn't about one comment or one argument. This had been waiting for a chance to happen. The hours moved slowly, painfully. My phone battery dropped to 5%. I turned off everything except the clock, conserving what little power I had left like it mattered. I leaned my head back against the bench and stared at the sky, willing myself not to cry. Crying felt like giving in to the version of the story where I was weak, unstable, exactly what they'd implied I was. Around midnight, a car pulled into the parking lot nearby. I tensed automatically, my body going rigid, every instinct on edge. The driver sat there for a moment before getting out, adjusting their coat. I looked away, not wanting to be seen. A few minutes later, footsteps approached. "Hey," a voice said softly. "Are you okay?" I looked up. It was a woman, probably in her 40s. She held her keys loosely in one hand, not threatening, not intrusive, just present. "I'm fine," I said automatically. She didn't argue. She didn't push. She just looked at me for a second longer than most people would. "I was at the party," she said gently. "I saw what happened." My chest tightened. "I'm not here to get involved," she added quickly. I didn't like how they treated you." Something in her tone, steady, uncurious, made my defenses crack just a little. "I don't have anywhere to go," I admitted. She nodded once, like she'd already guessed that. I thought that might be the case. She sat down on the opposite end of the bench, leaving space between us. "You don't deserve that," she said simply. No advice, no excuses, no minimizing. Just that, for the first time that night, I felt seen, not as a problem to manage, but as a person who'd been wronged. "I can't offer you much," she continued, "but I can offer you a ride to somewhere warm and a piece of information." That made me look at her again. "What kind of information?" I asked. She leaned in slightly and lowered her voice, glancing around even though no one was nearby. "Something your family doesn't want you asking questions about," she said. "And something you should probably look into first thing tomorrow." My heart started to race. She met my eyes and whispered the next sentence so quietly I almost missed it. And in that moment, I knew this night wasn't the end of my story. It was the beginning of something they never expected. I didn't ask her name right away. Something about the way she spoke made me want to listen first. Like saying anything too quickly might break whatever fragile calm had settled between us. She didn't rush me either. She just sat there, patient, like she understood that nights like this rearrange people from the inside out. "My name's Elaine," she said eventually. "I'm a friend of your cousin's. Not close, but close enough to notice things." I nodded slowly. "I'm Claire." She smiled faintly. "I know. That should have unsettled me, but it didn't. Everyone at the party knew my name. They just decided it wasn't worth defending." Elaine glanced toward the street, then back at me. "Before I say anything else, I need you to understand this," she said. "I'm not on a side. I don't get anything out of this. I just don't like seeing someone set up to take the fall." My stomach tightened. Set up for what? She didn't answer right away. Instead, she reached into her coat pocket and pulled out her phone. The screen lit up briefly, then went dark again. "I work in accounting," she said, "and I tend to notice patterns, numbers, stories that don't quite line up." I felt a chill that had nothing to do with the weather. "At the party," she continued, "I heard the argument, and then I heard what they said after you left." My jaw clenched. "They didn't waste time." "No," she agreed. "They rarely do." She leaned closer, lowering her voice even more. "Your family has been telling a very specific story about you, not just tonight. For a while." I swallowed. "What kind of story?" "That you're unstable," she said. "That you're irresponsible. That you cause problems and then disappear when things get hard." I laughed bitterly. "That's new. It's convenient," she replied calmly, "especially when paperwork is involved." That word made my heart start to race. "What paperwork?" I asked. Elaine held my gaze. "Anything that requires a signature, or a name, to attach liability to." I stared at her. "You're saying they're using me for something?" "I'm saying," she corrected gently, "that it would be very smart of you to check." She saw the confusion on my face and softened her tone. "Look, I don't know all the details, but I know this. When people push someone out publicly, it's often because they want to control the narrative before questions start getting asked." The bench felt suddenly unsteady beneath me. "You're not homeless because of a fight," she said. You're homeless because you're inconvenient right now. That sentence landed hard. I thought about the timing, the way the argument had escalated so quickly, the lack of hesitation, the way my mother hadn't even asked where I'd go. What do they want me gone from? I asked quietly. Elaine exhaled. I can't be sure, but if it were me, I'd start by checking anything with your name on it. Bank accounts, leases, loans, utilities, anything shared. I shook my head. I don't have anything like that. She didn't argue. That's what most people think. She stood then, offering me her hand. Come on, I'll drive you somewhere safe for the night. I hesitated only a second before taking it. Her car was warm, clean, ordinary in a way that felt surreal after everything that had happened. She drove without asking questions, giving me space to breathe. Before dropping me off at a small motel on the edge of town, she turned to me. One more thing, she said. When you start looking tomorrow, don't confront them yet. Gather facts first. I nodded. People panic when their version of the story is threatened, she added, and panic makes them sloppy. She handed me her card. If you need a second set of eyes, call me. I stepped out of the car feeling lighter than I had all night. Not because things were fixed, but because for the first time, I had direction. As I lay awake in the motel bed later, staring at the ceiling, her words replayed in my mind. Check anything with your name on it. I didn't know yet what I would find, but I knew one thing with absolute certainty. I hadn't been thrown out because I was the problem. I'd been thrown out because I was about to become one. For them, I barely slept that night. The motel room was quiet, but my mind wasn't. Every time I closed my eyes, Elaine's words replayed themselves, calm and precise, like she'd planted something that refused to stay buried. Check anything with your name on it. By morning, my fear had sharpened into something more focused. I borrowed the motel's old computer because my phone battery hadn't survived the night. The keyboard was sticky, the screen dim, but it worked. I logged into my email first, scrolling back months, then years, searching for anything I'd ignored because it didn't seem urgent at the time. There were more things than I expected. Notifications I'd dismissed, statements I'd assumed were duplicates, a few emails marked read that I didn't remember opening at all. My stomach tightened. I started with my bank account, or what I thought was my account. It took less than 5 minutes to realize it wasn't as simple as I believed. My name was there, but so was my mother's, listed as an authorized user, with permissions I didn't remember granting. I clicked through the transaction history. Small withdrawals at first, nothing that would have triggered alarms. Then larger ones. Transfers I didn't recognize, all spaced out just enough to look intentional. My hands started shaking. I opened another tab and pulled my credit report. I'd never done it before. I'd always assumed my credit was fine, boring, even. I wasn't reckless. I paid my bills. I didn't open cards casually. The page loaded slowly. Then it hit me. Accounts I didn't recognize. Balances I couldn't explain. A utility bill tied to an address I hadn't lived at in years. My chest felt tight, like the air in the room had thinned. I clicked into the details, reading carefully now, not skimming. Dates, signatures, phone numbers. Everything pointed back to my family, not directly, not sloppily, but close enough that once you saw it, you couldn't unsee it. They hadn't just been talking about me behind my back. They'd been using my name. The argument at the party made sense now. The urgency, the public rejection, the way my mother had said, "Don't make a scene, just go." They hadn't wanted me angry, they'd wanted me gone. I checked one more thing before my courage ran out. The shared storage account we'd used for years to keep important family documents. My heart pounded as I logged in. Folders opened, scans loaded, and there it was, a document with my name typed neatly at the bottom. A signature that looked like mine, almost. close enough to pass if no one looked too hard. I felt sick. They hadn't just pushed me out emotionally, they'd positioned me as the fallback. If questions came up, if bills went unpaid, if someone needed a name to point to, mine was ready. I leaned back in the chair, hands covering my face, trying to slow my breathing. The motel room suddenly felt too small. Elaine had been right. This wasn't about a fight. It was about control. By the time my phone buzzed, my hands had stopped shaking. It was my mother. "We need to talk." Her message read, "You embarrassed the family last night." I almost laughed. Minutes later, my cousin texted, "Mom says you overreacted. Can we clear this up quietly?" Quietly. They didn't know yet. That was the strange part. Within hours of my discovery, their tone had already shifted, from dismissal to damage control. They didn't know what I'd found, but they could feel something changing. People always can. I didn't reply to anyone. Instead, I made copies, screenshots, downloads. I emailed files to myself, saved backups, and wrote notes explaining what each document was and why it mattered. By the time I was done, my fear had transformed into clarity. They hadn't thrown me out because I was unstable. They'd thrown me out because I was the only one who could expose what they'd been hiding. And now that I knew, the power in the situation had quietly shifted. I packed my bag, checked out of the motel, and sat in my car for a long moment before starting the engine. Within days, they would come looking for me, not to apologize, but to make sure I stayed quiet. They were about to learn something they never expected. I wasn't going to. The next few days felt unreal, like time had sped up while my body lagged behind. Once I started looking, I couldn't stop. Every spare moment was spent cross-checking documents, pulling records, and matching dates. What had first looked like a handful of questionable accounts quickly revealed a pattern: deliberate, careful, and long-running. Utilities in my name tied to houses I'd never lived in. A credit card opened years ago, maxed out, then quietly closed. A short-term loan I'd never applied for, marked paid late more than once. Each discovery made my stomach drop, then harden. This wasn't sloppy desperation. This was planning. I called the bank first, heart pounding as I explained that I needed clarification on several accounts. The representative was polite, efficient, and disturbingly calm. "Yes," she said, after a pause. "Your mother is listed as an authorized user on this account. She's had access for several years. I didn't authorize those withdrawals," I said. There was another pause. "Then you'll want to file a dispute." The word dispute echoed in my head long after the call ended. I called the credit bureau next, then the utility company. Each conversation followed the same pattern: surprise, confirmation, instructions. By the end of the second day, I had a folder full of reference numbers, case IDs, and follow-up emails. My fear had shifted into something sharper: focus. That was when the calls from my family started. Not angry calls, concerned ones. My aunt left a voicemail asking if I was safe. My cousin texted to say my mom was really worried. My mother sent 3 messages in a row, each softer than the last. "Let's not blow this out of proportion. Families work things out privately. You don't want to make things worse for everyone." That last one told me everything. They knew, maybe not exactly what I'd found, but enough to sense the ground moving beneath them. On the 3rd day, my brother called. I almost didn't answer, but curiosity won. "Hey," he said, too casually. "Mom says you're acting weird." "I've been busy," I replied. "With what?" I smiled to myself. "Cleaning up messes." There was a beat of silence. "You don't need to do that," he said quickly. "Whatever's going on, we can talk about it." "Talk about what?" I asked. Another pause. Longer this time. "Look," he said, irritation creeping in. "If there are some bills or paperwork things, Mom handled all that. You didn't have to get involved." "I was already involved," I said calmly. I just didn't know it. His voice sharpened. You're overthinking this. No, I replied. I'm finally thinking clearly. He hung up without saying goodbye. That evening, my mother showed up where I was staying. She looked tired, smaller somehow. The confidence she'd worn at the party was gone, replaced by something frantic she tried to hide. We need to fix this, she said, standing in the doorway. Before it gets complicated. It's already complicated, I replied. She stepped inside without waiting for permission. You don't understand how bad this could get. I met her eyes. I understand exactly how bad it already is. Her mouth opened, then closed again. You don't need to involve anyone else, she said quietly. We can handle this as a family. That word, family, felt hollow now. You handled it without me, I said. Now I'm handling it without you. Her face went pale. You wouldn't? She whispered. I didn't answer, because I already had. Over the next 48 hours, things moved fast. Accounts were frozen, investigations opened, questions asked, and suddenly, the people who'd thrown me out without a second thought were calling non-stop, desperate to control a story that was no longer theirs. The whisper Elaine had given me on that bench hadn't just changed my understanding. It had started a chain reaction they couldn't stop, and the more they tried to pull me back in, the clearer it became. They weren't afraid of losing me. They were afraid of what I knew. The shift didn't happen loudly. There was no dramatic confrontation, no moment where I announced what I knew and watched everyone panic. The power moved quietly, almost invisibly. The way it does when people realize they can no longer control the story. It started with silence. For the first time since the party, I stopped responding. No texts, no calls, no explanations. I let my phone buzz and go dark again. Over and over, until the urgency on the other end grew sharp enough to feel through the screen. My mother tried a different tone. Please call me. I'm scared something bad is happening. You don't understand the consequences of this. I understood them perfectly. What she didn't understand was that fear had finally changed sides. The first real crack appeared when my aunt showed up unannounced at my cousin's apartment, where I was staying temporarily. She looked rattled, not angry, like someone who had just realized they'd defended the wrong version of events. Your mom says you're talking to banks, she said cautiously, and lawyers. I'm talking to people who can explain what's in my name. I replied. That could get serious, she said. It already is. She hesitated. She says you're confused, that you're stressed. I smiled faintly. She would. That was when my aunt's expression changed. Not defensive, curious. She also said, my aunt continued slowly, that if anything comes up, it's because you were irresponsible with paperwork. There it was, the story they'd been preparing. I met my aunt's eyes. If that were true, I said calmly, why would they need to tell it in advance? She didn't answer. Within hours, the calls escalated. My brother left a voicemail, his voice tight. You're going to ruin everything if you don't stop. My mother followed with another message, this one trembling with panic. They're asking questions, she wrote. This doesn't have to go any further. I didn't reply, because it already had. The next day, a representative from one of the credit agencies called to confirm details. She asked if I recognized the signatures, if I'd authorized anyone else to act on my behalf, if I could confirm my address history. Each question felt like a step further away from the version of me my family had been telling. The unstable one, the unreliable one, the convenient scapegoat. I answered calmly, factually. When the call ended, I sat back and realized something strange. I wasn't scared anymore. The fear had burned off, leaving clarity behind. That afternoon, my mother finally confronted me directly. She showed up again, this time without excuses. Her voice was low, urgent. You need to stop, she said. Right now. Why? I asked. Because once this starts, It doesn't stop, she replied. You don't know what you're doing. I know exactly what I'm doing, I said. I'm correcting the record. Her eyes filled with tears, not the soft kind, but the furious kind people cry when they're losing control. You're destroying this family. I thought about the night I'd stood outside with nowhere to go. No, I said quietly. I'm surviving it. She reached for my arm, then stopped herself. We protected you, she insisted. You couldn't have handled the truth. You didn't protect me, I replied. You used me. That was when she finally broke, not into apologies, into anger. You think you're so righteous, she snapped. You think anyone will believe you over us? I met her gaze steadily. They already do. She froze. That was the moment she understood. Not everything, but enough. Enough to know the narrative was no longer hers to shape. Enough to know the version of events she'd prepared was already unraveling. She left without another word. In the days that followed, relatives went quiet, invitations disappeared, group chats stopped buzzing. The family that had once closed ranks against me was suddenly scattered, unsure who might be next. And in that silence, something unexpected happened. I felt free, not because everything was fixed. It wasn't. But because for the first time, my life wasn't being edited by people who needed me small. They had thrown me out to protect themselves. Instead, they'd handed me the truth. And once truth changes hands, power follows. I didn't go back to my family's house. Not because I was afraid of them, but because I finally understood something that night on the sidewalk. I had never been homeless in the way they wanted me to believe. They hadn't taken my shelter. They had tried to take my position. For days after everything broke open, I stayed where I was, quiet, observing, letting the systems do what they were designed to do once the truth entered them. I didn't chase outcomes. I didn't threaten anyone. I didn't even explain myself beyond what was necessary. I let fact speak. Banks don't care about family dynamics. Credit agencies don't care about intentions. Paperwork doesn't care about feelings. And slowly, the world began responding, not to their version of me, but to the reality of what had happened. Accounts were flagged, access was restricted, names were separated. What had once been hidden behind familiarity was suddenly visible under scrutiny. I received calls from people who had never spoken to me before, asking clear questions and taking careful notes. Every time I answered, I felt steadier, more solid, like I was finally standing in my own outline instead of one drawn for me. My family, on the other hand, grew smaller. Not physically, but socially. Invitations stopped. Conversations stalled. People became careful about what they said around whom. The confidence they'd once worn so easily was replaced by something brittle. They didn't reach out to apologize. They reached out to assess damage. My mother left one final message. I don't recognize you anymore, she wrote. I read it once, then deleted it, because for the first time, I did recognize myself. Elaine checked in a few days later, just a short text asking if I was okay. I told her yes. Not because everything was resolved, but because I wasn't lost anymore. That mattered more. I found a room to rent. Temporary. Modest. Mine. I unpacked slowly, choosing what to keep close and what to let go. The act felt symbolic in a way I hadn't expected. I didn't rebuild overnight. But I rebuilt deliberately, and as the days passed, one truth settled deeper than the rest. The night my family threw me out wasn't the moment I lost everything. It was the moment I stopped being their shield. They had pushed me outside believing I'd disappear quietly, that I'd carry their secrets with me out into the dark. Instead, I had stepped into the light. Not with vengeance, not with chaos, just with honesty. And honesty has weight. It bends rooms. It changes conversations. It rearranges power without ever raising its voice. I was never really homeless. I was just temporarily without the lies that had kept me small. And once those were gone, I finally had space to stand.